All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, employment attorney Peter Raybar is here to tell us how AI is being used in the workplace and new rules that must be followed. Next up, Sean Slevin, founder of Swim Strong Foundation, talks to us about a new law that would address the age for lifeguards due to a shortage in New York. Next up, finally, Curlin Joseph, the director of Family Court Services, shares with us a program whereby low-level teen offenders have their cases heard by a jury of their peers. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello, welcome to Today's Verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesh and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at bronxnet.tv. Starting July 5th, New York employers must now tell applicants how artificial intelligence is being used to make hiring decisions. This law is called Automated Employment Decision Tools. But how does it work? What should job hunters know? Employment attorney Peter Raybar is back here to tell us more. Peter, thanks for coming back to the studio.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
We love having you. So it's so much easier. We were talking about this off camera, but just applying for jobs now. You basically just take your resume, upload it, and send it right on to the prospective employer. But they have so many resumes to go through, I would think AI would be a good way to just cut through and get right to the candidate that you need.
Well, that's the debate, David. Is it a good way? It's certainly one way. And employers are facing a problem where, because of budget cuts, they're cutting back on their HR and recruiting departments. And because of tools available to candidates, as you mentioned, on sites like LinkedIn and others, a candidate can send out hundreds of resumes with one click. So people are applying for more jobs than ever. Employers are getting more resumes than ever, and they're searching for ways to get through these resumes and find the diamond in the rough with smaller HR departments. So
how do they use HI? Like, how do you do it? Like, do you plug in certain features that you're looking for in terms of words in a particular resume that resonate, or age of candidates? Like, what do you put in there? Like, how does it work?
Well, there's a lot of different ways AI tools are being used in the recruiting process, and as these generative AI tools are improving, we're seeing new applications of them. But it could be something as simple as, here are the search terms and find the best candidates with these skills. And so if you're a candidate, certainly one piece of advice is you should be tailoring your resumes. You shouldn't be sending out 400 resumes. You should be tailoring your resumes
to that particular employer.
Specific jobs, exactly. But employers are using these tools to either screen resumes. In some cases, they're conducting interviews. They're by video, and there are actually laws in other states to address that use.
But who's conducting the interview? The AI is actually conducting the interview.
Exactly.
Not just screening through the resumes and picking, but actually doing the interview itself.
Right. They're taking a script and interviewing candidates via video conferencing, and making decisions based on those interviews. So, there's a lot of different ways AI is being used in the process. I mean, you're not going to use AI to hire a CEO, right? But you're going to use it to. A lot of employers are using it to screen out these thousands of resumes, or create lists of the strongest candidates. The tier A's, the tier B's, the tier C's of the resumes that have come in, and then hopefully managers are using the output of those tools to make the decisions. Hopefully there's still a human touch.
There
involved.
Certainly can be an abuse of the system. What if AI decides it only likes a particular type of candidate, and you don't even realize that AI likes a particular candidate? They look for the 35 to 40-year-old white male, whatever. They're picking. You don't even realize they're doing it, but they're doing it. They're they're really negating so many of the other resumes. How do you pick up on that? How do you know whether the AI itself is actually prejudiced against a certain type of worker, prospective worker?
Well, that's where the New York City automated employment decision tool law comes in, because AI does have these problems. It's documented. There's research that shows it. AI tends to be racist, and it tends to be ageist. In some cases, it can also be sexist. So what this law requires, if you're using these tools, and that's important to substantially assist or replace discretionary decision making, you have to, one, audit the tools on a yearly basis, two, post a notice to the applicants, and three, provide an alternate means if an applicant needs an accommodation.
Let's talk to the audit. Talk about the audit first. How does that work? How do you audit a system and know that it's not being unfair to others? How does that? Does the audit just give you a list of who's picked and who's not picked, and based on that, you're supposed to look at it and know that there's been a little bit of prejudice to the system? How does that work?
Well, technically under the law, you're supposed to hire an independent auditor, someone who has no financial connection whatsoever to the company. And guess what? That's an emerging business in the AI field now, is to be one of these auditors. And what they're supposed to do is take the raw data and look at who applied, who was selected in different categories. Now, importantly, age is not one of the categories, disability is not one of the categories. These are gender and race and ethnicity based categories right now that's supposed to be analyzed. And basically the auditors look to see who applied, who was selected, how does that compare amongst groups, what are the selection rates and what are the impact rates. And then based on that, they make it, they perform an analysis on whether there are statistically significant differences.
And you mentioned earlier that you have to let the applicant know that they're being screened in this process. And by the way, what I thought is interesting, because I read a little bit about it, is that the AI is allowed to put you in little buckets of different areas of where that you would fall.
Right.
But as long as a human is picking out of those buckets, and that's fine. Correct?
Well, right now, yes. And so, I would say there's a really interesting thing going on right now in the employment law space. There's this law which, is the first of its kind anywhere in the world to regulate the use of these tools in the hiring process. So that's a good thing. But there's plenty of loopholes. And so the, advocates for employees who are pushing for this law are worried about the loopholes that employers could jump through. And so you raise one of them. So, an employer could just say, well, the AI is not making decisions. It's just providing me with different sets of applicants I could look at. Well, the reality is, if there's an A list and a B list, is the employer ever going to look at the B list?
Right.
I don't know.
No.
They could probably make a pretty good argument that they would, but they don't have to.
Getting back to the opting out, so let's say you're a prospective candidate and you opt out and you say, no, I don't want my resume picked this way. Do they have to give you another way of being interviewed, or do you just not have a chance at that job?
Well, technically, they are supposed to provide you with, an accommodation, whether you need one or whether you just want one because you don't want the tool used. Now, the law is not clear on what it has to be and how they have to do it. And
I'm sure if you opt out, though, it doesn't make a great impression on the employer, who all of a sudden says, well, this is going to be a problem candidate to begin with. I'll interview, but you're not getting this kind of job.
Well, it's definitely a way to single yourself out. Whether it's a good way to single yourself out, probably not. But that's the reality of what job searches are for certain jobs right now. I mean, you're going to have to deal with these tools. And so my advice would be, be the candidate who, can really tailor your resume and your qualifications and your skills to satisfy these tools,
right.
And get ahead.
Great stuff. We got to have you back to talk about this. I could talk about this all day.
Sure.
But,
I would love to.
All right, but we have to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We're here with Curlin Joseph, the Director of Family Court Services with the Queens Defenders. How are you doing today, Curlin?
Well, how are you?
You're going to be talking about a a great program. I find this extremely interesting. The youth court. Tell the viewers a little bit about it if you could.
Okay, so our Youth Justice Corps program was born out of the intense interest that we saw. A lot of the attorneys in our office volunteered at local schools and saw that the kids were very, very interested in anything law related. And then while at the schools, we noticed that there were, kids were getting suspended for what appeared to us to be like minor offenses. They took out their cell phone. And recognizing how that then disrupts their education, increases the likelihood of truancy, we came up with the idea of doing the youth court program in the high schools. Now, before we started it in the high schools, we did it in the community in partnership with the Queens Library. The goal of the program is obviously to educate the young people about the various legal systems that are at play, the criminal legal system, juvenile legal system, civil as well. But also it's to give the young people an opportunity to express their thoughts and their opinions, to be able to take a position and then support it with facts, not to just accept anything that you hear, but to do your own investigation.
So let me ask you a question. So I know you gave an example of somebody who took their cell phone out, let's say in class. What are some other examples that would be ripe for a youth justice court?
Sure. Like in the community, we got cases referred to us by the local precinct of juvenile reports. Those are reports where a child is arrested, but it's not referred to court, family court or criminal court. And so some of those types of cases were assault, like fights,
Right.
Stealing, petty larceny, either stealing from a friend or family member or stealing from a store, criminal mischief, like doing graffiti on someone's property. Those were the typical trespassing. Those were the kinds of cases we got in the community.
So once that happens, does the mother have to consent to
Yes,
juvenile youth court? How does it work?
yes. Once we would get a case, we would reach out to the parent, explain the program to the parent, because obviously if you can get the parent on board, then you're likely to get the child on board. Yes, so we would absolutely reach out to the parents, get their consent to have their child participate. Then the challenge is now convincing the child to follow through on it. But once that occurred, then yes, the young person would come to you.
Now, where were the original venues? They were in Far Rockaway, from what I understand. Or
Yes.
where exactly in Queens did you first start this out?
The very first one was in the Far Rockaway Library for Teens. That's where we started the first program. And that's where we get the cases referred from the 101st Precinct.
Now, this is almost like a true trial setting, really. I mean, you have a judge, a jury,
Yes,
prosecutor,
Yes.
defense.
yes.
Where do you find everybody to participate? Listen, as a
Okay.
criminal attorney myself, I have a hard time getting everybody together for a trial. How do you
Right.
manage to do this?
So the great thing is being in the teen library, there are other teens there. And so that helped with our recruitment. So we would get our young people by, just going to community events and enrolling them. Then we would train them to play all the roles. We had myself and other attorneys train the young people. And then they would be the one to interview the young person when they came. So they're not being interviewed by an adult. They're being interviewed by their youth attorney. And we had it set up that it was a 3-week process. The first week, we got the case. The second week, we discussed the different arguments that could be made. The third week, we had the trial. And so not only did we use the young people in our program, but we also partnered with the 101st Precinct. They have a program where they have young people that volunteer with them. So we would invite them to come and be the impartial jurors, because we had some instances where the participants in our program knew the child that had the case. So we would invite them to come and be the impartial jurors. So, it was a group effort, but the library would set aside, it would actually close when we did a hearing so that the child could have absolute confidentiality. And we would do the hearing, and literally from start to finish, we always had an adult be the judge, but the young people played every other role.
When there's a decision that's made, it's made by the jury. Am I correct?
The jury, yes, would make the recommendation, but the judge would sign off on it for the most part. Or
What are some examples of some recommendations that the jury makes?
sure. For example, we had a young man who graffitied on his neighbor's sidewalk. They suggested that he write a letter of apology and that he do a piece of art that could hang in the library. We've had some serious cases where, for example, a child needed mental health services. So the recommendation of the youth jury was that they be referred to mental health and show that they've attended a certain amount of sessions. That's on the more serious side. Like for example, with the petty larcenies, obviously a letter of apology, mentorship meeting with we had a gentleman by the name of Mr. Brandon. So he would sit and do one-on-one sessions with the young people, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times, where they would come and meet with him and go over what their goals were, and any support that they needed, he would provide it. So very creative solutions. And in the high school, they were very creative in their solutions. For example, with the cell phone issue, the kids came up with getting a box that they would have in the classroom. When they walked into the classroom, they would put their phones in the box. When the class was over, then they take their phones out. Like that would be one of the sanctions that they created.
What if you have a repeat offender, someone who's done it a few times, which I'm sure that happens, right?
Yes, we did have repeat offenders. And so then the level of the sanctions would increase, but the young people would do this because like sometimes like they literally mimic what we did in court. So like if someone was a first offender, sometimes they wouldn't even have to have a full hearing. They would say, okay, you're a good kid, you're coming to school, your grades are good. All right, just stay out of trouble for 1 month and this is over. But then if that young person came back, then they would actually have to have a full hearing and the jury would have to decide then on a different sanction.
Where are the youth justice courts now? Where are they?
Okay, so we have them in right now, I think 5 to 6 libraries, and we're in about 3 or 4 high schools.
And are you trying to continually expand into different boroughs? And
okay, so as Queens Defenders, we're a public defender's office. And so our contract with the city is to work in the county of Queens. So any expansion that we do would be in Queens. So we are in conversation with the library to expand the program this coming fall to maybe 1 or 2 more libraries.
What tips would you give, we don't have too much time, to some parent who's watching right now and thinks that their child should be adjudicated by a jury of their peers? What would you say?
Okay, so if, for example, if you go to the Queens Defenders website and you have a child who's interested in youth court or finding out about it, they can ask for that information on our website. Also, with the libraries, what they do is they create like an enrollment form. So if you go to the Queens Library and you look at youth justice court, then you can actually fill out a form so that your child will be contacted by one of our staff members to see if they want to participate. Or, it would be great, like if a parent came across a situation where they wanted their kid to actually go to court, maybe for something that happened, that would be fantastic. But they could do it that same way.
Carlin, thank you very much. Carlin Joseph, Amongst Defenders, is a great program. I'm very interested in this. I wish my trials went as smoothly as these trials may go. All right, stay with us. Today's verdict has so much more right after this. All right, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We always encourage you to stay connected. Tweet me at David Lesh. There is a new law that lowers the age for the lifeguards due to a shortage of lifeguards in New York. Executive Director and founder Sean Slevin from Swim Strong's Foundation, so many S's, is here to tell us more.
Fast.
Oh my God! But first of all, nice to see you in the studio.
Thank you so much.
Last time we did this virtually, but it is summer. It's time to swim. Let's talk a little bit about the lifeguards. Do we have enough lifeguards? What's going on?
Sadly, again, we do not. This is an issue really that has plagued New York City for decades. Yeah. This is not just a COVID-related issue, but COVID certainly has blown the roof off of this, and the need to really dedicate more focus and resources to this issue. And one of those things is the lowering of the age for lifeguards to start from 16 to 15.
Now, should anybody be worried that we now have 15-year-olds who are
They're supervised.
who are protecting us while we swim?
Of
Some
course.
15-year-olds, I'm not quite sure.
Well, first of all,
they're
they
as
have to
mature
be
as others.
they have to be qualified.
They have to okay.
That's the baseline. But then they're also going to be supervised, so they're not going to be alone, needing to make
Supervised
some decisions.
by whom? By non-lifeguards? I
No,
don't understand.
by senior lifeguards
All right.
who do have the experience, the years of knowledge.
So
and
we're dealing with pools or bodies of water
think
that are
it's-
large enough that you can at least have two. You have
I think they're starting this, if I understand it correctly, at summer camps.
summer camps, sure.
So in that case, yes, it's going to be a very prescribed space, and it will be.
Well, I was reading about it. It seems that's a good place to start because
Yeah.
you have counselors who are
Also.
there who are also going to be basically looking after the
As many eyes
kids
on
as
children
possible.
in the water is always a good thing, whether it be in a camp situation or your own private
Right.
situation.
Let's talk swimming in New York.
Sure.
From what I understand, there aren't enough pools. Am I correct?
Yes, sadly, I describe New York City as an aquatic desert. It is very ironic because we are a maritime city. We are a city of water.
We're an island.
We're an island. I mean, we have water all through us and around us. The Parks Department has 58 facilities, only 12 of which are actual swimming pools. And of those 12, only 6 are potentially available year-round. So if you were to look across all of the different council districts across, there's 51 across the city, I don't even think there's one in half of the districts.
Now, is that a financial reason? Is that staffing? What's the reason for that?
Well, finance to build them is one issue. It costs many millions of dollars to build an appropriate multi-use year-round facility, right? And then, of course, yes, it's expensive to staff them. No, that's why swimming lessons are so expensive, right? All of those things come together. But we definitely need more of them. We also need to look at our natural waterfronts.
There's so many areas where we could swim in, off the rivers or even kayak. Why don't we make more use of that? Is there a danger factor there?
Well, certainly our rivers here, I mean, the Bronx River is treacherous, and it's known. We've lost many, many people on the Bronx River. And there are areas that are signposted, fenced off, and yet still people make their way into that water, which is mind-boggling. But our other rivers, the Hudson, the Harlem River, the East River, they're very powerful. My dad, actually, as a young man, and his friends used to swim in the East River, and one of the boys drowned.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they got pulled into the piling, and it was like being in a washing machine. He
It's
literally
dangerous.
got beaten to death.
Water
Yeah.
is dangerous.
And there's just tremendous current.
Can we talk about some new legislation that you're trying to get passed? Let's
Sure.
talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we see the learning of swimming as one aspect of water safety in a broader context. We know that climate change is bringing water to us more and more frequently. We had a situation with Ida, you may remember, back in September of 21. Ida was the first storm of its nature. It hit us on the coast. We expected that. What we had no expectation was the amount of torrential bursts of rainfall that hit us inland. So Ida was responsible for 91 drownings between New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and
I
Pennsylvania.
didn't realize it was that much.
And 13 of those were my neighbors who were trapped and drowned in their basements. So we really all need, swim skilled or not, to look at water from a much broader context, not just a recreational one, but water in our lives daily, at home to manage
And how
the
do we
risk.
do that? How are we supposed to do
Well,
that?
for example, education, clearly. So we have a program, Know Before You Go. We've had some funding from the City Council, which we're very grateful for. We got into 42 schools in the last 6 months to deliver the program. None up here in the Bronx, though.
No, unfortunately, no.
So I'm hoping that some academic leaders will see this and invite us to come in and present the programming, because all of us, whether we're swim skilled or not, really need to understand water differently. And the fact is, all of us are subject to the possibility of a drowning, swim skilled or not.
Let's talk about some tips, though, if we could, because
Sure.
it is that time of year.
Absolutely.
What tips would you give to a mom who has children who are going to be swimming, or just to the mom themselves when they go swimming?
Absolutely, of course. So do go to where it is a safe, designated place to swim, and that place will have a lifeguard. Talk to the lifeguard. Ask if there's anything you should be aware of that's going on in the water, because they will know.
For instance, like riptides.
Currents, yes, currents. There could even be on the bottom, the topography of that particular place, a hole, right? A drop-off place. There could be a boulder. There could be a sandbar. So they will know. The lifeguard will understand all of
Know
that.
the topography.
All of that, and be able to appropriately tell us where it's safe to swim. They also, of course, are watching for marine life. You know, recently we had 4 shark bites
Sure.
out on the island. They're watching
Last
for that.
weekend.
Yes. So they're watching for that. So that's very important. As it relates to young children, never be more than an arm reach away from those children around any type of water, because drowning happens in a heartbeat. It's
That quickly.
instantaneous. It's that quick. And kids at their age, little ones, it's their job to go and explore. That's what they're hardwired to do. So naturally, they're going to go to water. It's so attractive. They can see themselves in it, right? I mean, there's so many reasons that kids, all of us, love the water. But we have to really keep an eye on them. The 4th of July is the most deadly holiday as it relates to drowning. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
So there are anywhere between 17 and 25 children lost every year around this holiday, because it's a wonderful opportunity for families to get together, but everybody's celebrating, and not always is there a dedicated pair of eyes on those children
Well, I
around
guess the
water.
motto is stay safe, use your good common sense, and always be aware and keep your children close. But we want to thank you for coming today. It's nice to see you in the studio.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully you'll come back and give us some more tips.
Love to do that. Thanks so much.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out on bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to email me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet me at davidlesh, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. So from myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. See you in 2 weeks.